Long-time viewers of the channel will know that I am a bit of a Luddite. While I love a bit of modern technology, it needs to be thoughtfully implemented and equitable, and so when reviewing a car there are reasonable odds that if all of its controls are hidden within touchscreens there will be some criticism, unless it's really well implemented. That's because to operate basic controls like, say, the window defroster or the seat heaters, I'd assumed it's safer to be able to do that without actually looking away from the road, or perhaps with just a quick glance. And in my experience, no touchscreen has ever given me that level of simplicity. And recently, Swedish auto magazine Vi Bilägare, yeah, I'm sorry for my Swedish pronunciation, looked at the difference in time taken to perform basic functions like adjusting the climate control and changing radio settings in cars with modern minimal designs and those with a more tactile experience. So is there really a big difference between touchscreens and buttons? Who came out on top for their interface, and should I just shut up? Let's find out. The concepts underlying ergonomics go right back to the very beginnings of humans using tools. From the moment Ugg said to Ooft that this stone fits my hand better and works better for making arrows, humans have tried to find or make tools or devices that combine the physical, cognitive and organizational components so those tools are really great for whatever they do, while at the same time taking account of safety needs. It's actually a remarkably challenging combination of things, as anyone who's spent any time behind the wheel of a car built before the 1980s can attest. Auto manufacturers weren't always terribly quick on the uptake, with many earlier vehicles featuring an array of controls spattered across the car's canvas like a Norman Lewis painting. My Morris Minor originally sported two switches that look identical and which are unlabelled, one of which works the lights and the other works the wipers. They're nowhere near the steering wheel and require you to remove your hand from the wheel to turn either of them on. And bad ergonomics can result in anything from a minor irritation to a significant safety issue. While in the minor those switches might lead you to inadvertently flash, no, not like that, the driver of an oncoming car, or, as was often the case, wave your wipers at them. The Mazda MX-30 we recently test drove, link here, I hope. Yeah. It is linked down in the description. It has a dedicated touchscreen for climate controls placed just behind the shifter. That allows you to conveniently knock the car into neutral while you're driving if you catch it wrong as you're tweaking the temperature. A+ design there, no notes. While there are some recommended standards and requirements for some instrumentation and controls on vehicles, for example, ISO 15008:2017 defines minimum requirements for the image quality and legibility of displays, containing dynamic visual information presented to the driver of a passenger car by onboard transport information and control systems while the car is in motion. Those standards and requirements don't actually mean that what's presented has to be done in the most efficient and least distracting way, and to be fair, what works for me as a 5'6"-ish human won't necessarily work great for another 5'6"-ish human, let alone a 6 foot or a 5 foot one. But ergonomics have little to do with the current transition to touchscreen and voice controls for cars' various gubbins. There are a couple of reasons for that shift. The one that automakers would really like you to talk about comes from a minimalist aesthetic, perhaps most clearly demonstrated by Tesla's single-center touch screen and simple or even Spartan interiors. The various automakers have all waxed lyrical about their desire to make the automobile a living space, and one that's usually calm and serene. The other rather more prosaic reason is that it's way cheaper to put all the controls on a touchscreen. Not only is it cheaper in terms of the initial build, since that screen is almost certainly going in anyway, but it also means that in terms of spare parts stock for the lifespan of at least the warranty, that automaker only has to keep one part in stock instead of 20 or 30. Okay, so let's see what Vi Bilägare were looking at. It took 12 vehicles, 11 of them current models, and one of them a 2005 Volvo V70, and drove them down an airfield at 110 kilometers per hour. That's about 70 miles per hour. During that test run, the driver was timed performing a set of 4 basic grouped tasks, the most complex of which was the multi-step climate control adjustment. Activate the heated seat, increase the temperature by 2 degrees, and turn on the screen defroster. Other tests were notionally simpler. Reset the trip computer for 1, turn on the radio and select Sweden's Program 1, and finally, lower the instrument lighting to its lowest setting and turn off the center display. The magazine states that the drivers, quote, had time to get to know the cars and infotainment systems before the test started. What exactly that might mean is a little vague, because if you've driven a Volvo V70 for 17 years and then have a few hours to get used to a Tesla... Well, anyway, let's assume that the drivers were either equally familiar with or equally unfamiliar with the vehicles they were driving, at least until we hear otherwise. During the test, the cars that performed the best in terms of the least time to complete the functions, required the least time looking away from the road, were... well, it was one of them, and by quite a long way. I'm gonna surprise no one here, it's the button cornucopia that is the Volvo V70. And the worst, it was the car with the biggest screen, the MG Marvel R. Although that while I understand that MG's head unit software has dramatically improved from the version I tried, it would have to be a completely different beast to have come out top in this test. But what is particularly interesting about this test is how dramatic the difference is between the best and worst cars. That MG Marvel R driver took 4 times as long to complete the tasks, nearly 45 seconds versus 10 in the Volvo V70, during which time the MG had covered over 1.3 kilometers, whereas the Volvo was only 300 meters down the road. That's 0.9 versus 0.2 of a mile for those of you wanting imperial. That means that for 4 times as long, the driver is distracted and potentially looking away from the road, which could have serious consequences for anyone that the driver and vehicle might, shall we say, interact with during that period. But this isn't just a problem that's limited to budget automakers like MG. The best performing, quote, car with a screen was the Volvo C40, and its nearest other competitor was the Dacia Sandero, a vehicle which uses a mixture of buttons, knobs, and your own phone as its touchscreen. As soon as we get into vehicles that are largely touchscreen controlled, we hit at least double the distance and time of the archaic Volvo V70, with the Tesla Model 3, Volkswagen ID3 and Hyundai Ioniq 5 all clocking in at 700 to 800 meters to accomplish those self-same tasks. BMW's iX racks up over 900 meters of driver distraction before the tasks were completed. Not entirely surprising given how complex BMW's interface is. And I can hear some of you frantically yelling at the screen, "Use the voice control!" And while you might find that yelling at Siri at home doesn't quite transmit to me, it is true that pretty much all of these vehicles feature some degree of voice control, and certainly that's an option for some folks, and sometimes it works. But I have to say I'm yet to run into a car that absolutely consistently follows my voice control directions, as it does when I press a button. Possibly that's because my accent is weirdly munged by living all over the UK and having lived in the US for a while. And sometimes I've had some very entertaining results, including asking a car to set navigation directions and the car then trying to phone someone random out of my phone's contact list. Someone in another country, where it would have been the middle of the night, which led to a very frantic and somewhat distracted attempt to persuade it not to do that. That was the BMW i4, if I remember rightly. So how do we fix this, especially given that unless countries start legislating that basic functions need to be easily and simply accessible, and that automakers are unlikely to go back to putting buttons in their car as a zen office-come-home interiors? Well, I think it's time that we start including use of the head unit in the safety scoring. The NCAP, Euro NCAP, Australasian NCAP, and all the NCAPs and their equivalents across the world need to start examining just how distracting, or just how well implemented those head units are. That may focus the teams at various automakers on the rather important work of building safety back into the vehicle interfaces, and maybe concentrating a little less on making NFTs of their favourite influencer's metaverse fashion show. Ugh. But what say you? Does it really matter? Are you a screen convert, or do you love to press those buttons? Let us know in the comments below. That's it for today. Thanks for joining me, and see you next time. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends. And if you really liked it, why not leave us a super thanks? It's easy to do and everything you send goes towards helping us make great content. If you haven't already, make sure you've subscribed to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolve Take 2, and give the bell a gentle ring to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go out to everyone who makes TE possible. That includes everyone who supports us on Patreon and on YouTube, as well as those of you who just watch and share the videos. If you're a supporter at the charged up level, you'll see your name here on my right. And if you just joined, we're sorry if your name isn't showing. We currently render the list out every week or so, but sometimes our videos are produced a few weeks in advance. Thanks to our self-driving tier supporters Chris Maxwell, Pedro Mura Pinheiro, Patrick Boyarski, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, David Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leong, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tezza in the Gong, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Kyle Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Dan Blair, Jim Burness, Chris Ascenta, Chris and Michael Johnson, Peter Dillinger, and Denny Hyde, and of course, out of this world thanks to our Starman supporters, Anonymous Freak, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Rory Litwin, Joe Bresney, Reed R, JP Fagerback, Russ, Will Graylan, Matthew Drobnak, Kevin Burridge, John Lyons, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Laura Reynolds, and Ian. Want to be part of that amazing list? You can join Patreon at the link below. Hit the join button below to support us on YouTube, or show us your support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or our cool swag store. Links are all down there. And if you're unable to support us financially, just know that watching the video and sharing it makes a real difference to our ad revenue and stops the ever-hungry algorithm from devouring us. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving.